As you continue to work as a graphic designer, you're going to find that not everyone is nice enough to use layers in their design. So if someone ever sends you artwork that doesn't have layers currently in the document, I'm going to show you how to remedy that by creating and editing your own layers along the way. So in this case, I've got a piece of artwork here, and it doesn't have layers in it necessarily. It's got one single layer called background. And if I expand this out, you can see that it's got several different groups and subgroups and sublayers, and it's just a big mess, making it hard for me to find everything that I'm looking for. So what I'm going to do is create several layers to help me out with the organizational structure. The first thing I'm going to do is take inventory of the document that I'm looking at and decide exactly what pieces are going to go on each layer. So I know for a fact that I want to create a layer for this photograph. I want the photo to be on its own layer. So I'm going to target the background layer, and I'll create a new layer by clicking the Create New Layer icon. When I do that, it automatically creates a new layer called Layer 2. And that's okay for now. I then want all of the buttons to be on their own layer. So let's go ahead and create a new layer, and this one's going to be called Layer 3. I also want the logo to be on its own layer, so I'll click and add a new layer called Layer 4. Now it's time to actually get in and start moving this information to these new layers. Now that I've got my layers created, let's go ahead and edit those layers so that they make a little bit more sense. I'm going to go first to Layer 2, and remember this was for my photo, so I'm just going to call it Photo. Layer 3 here is going to turn out to be for the buttons. And then Layer 4, I'm going to double click to edit that and make that the logo. So each time I go to edit the layer, I'm just double clicking on it, changing the name, and hitting enter. In previous versions of Illustrator, that wasn't possible. You actually had to double click, a modal box would open, you would fill out the name, and then you would hit apply. In Illustrator CS6 though, they've redone the entire user interface so that you can now do inline editing on your layers. So much more helpful. At any time, you can also come in and double click a layer, and it will bring up the Layer Options dialog box. In the Layer Options, you'll be able to set the name of the layer, change the color of the layer, and determine whether or not it's a template, whether or not it's shown, whether or not it shows a preview, also whether or not it's locked, whether or not it's a printable layer, and whether or not you want to dim the images in the layer to 50%. In this case, I'm not going to make any change except for the color. So let's go down and let's change the color of this. I'm going to change it from this medium blue to cyan. Then I'll hit OK. When I do that, it changes the color. For buttons, I'll double click. I'll change it from green to yellow. Hit OK, and it makes that change. For the photo layer, I'll come in and change that. Since the photo has a lot of red in it, I want to get away from the red color. So I'll change this to something that might contrast with it very nicely. In this case, I think that green will contrast nicely, so I'll select it and hit OK. Finally, the background, well, it's blue and the color of the layer is blue. So I'll double click and I'll come back in and I'll change this to something like magenta and hit OK. Now that I've got all of my layers created and edited the way they need to be, I'm ready to start targeting individual objects on the background layer and then moving them to the correct position in the document.